I would like to begin by saying on behalf of the Brazilian Socialist Equality Group, express our deep sorrow at the loss of Comrade Helen Halyard, and above all, to pay tribute to her lifelong dedication to building the international Trotskyist movement, a struggle that we intend to carry forward in her name. Helen's long and inspiring political trajectory was determined by the courageous choices that she made from the very beginning. Most critically, Helen consciously rejected the nationalist outlook that dominated political radicalism at the days of her youth. She committed instead to the historical cause of the International Socialist Revolution. The party that she joined, the Workers' League, did not give pragmatic answers to political problems. It challenged the prevailing moods and the superficial appearance of reality. Unlike other parties, its existence was based on the fight for political principles and on a wide historical and international perspective. The Workers' League was born out of a struggle against the Pabloid degeneration of the Socialist Workers' Party, carrying their revolutionary activity in the heart of world imperialism during the post-war era. The SWP succumbed to the violent pressures of hostile class forces. They have liquidated the prestige won by an unyielding struggle for socialist internationalism to hail anti-Marxist petty bourgeois leaderships. The SWP leaders not only betrayed, but systematically slandered the American and the international working class. Obscuring its objective revolutionary role, they labeled the working class passive and conservative, and contrasted it to the image of long-bearded men in olive green uniforms taking up power with guns in their hands. The former Trotskyist, James Cannon, trampling upon the work of his life, proclaimed the Fourth International to be actually inexistent. He claimed that the creation of an international revolutionary party was an open task, now centered on Cuba and the Cuban Revolution and the leaders of this revolution. If not Castro and his friends, where will we find better candidates to build such party? The task of overthrowing capitalism and fighting imperialism was transferred by the SWP to such petty bourgeois leaderships of anti-colonial movements. This Philistine political theory shifted the grounds of revolutionary struggle away from the actual centers of capitalism with its explosives, class antagonisms. But even more deeply, in the very struggles within the advanced capitalist countries, this theory diverted the axis from the working class and its socialist aspirations. The Cuban Revolution, wrote a Chilean spokesman for the SWP, has signified not only the breaking up of the inter-American system imposed by imperialism, but has had impact in the United States itself, influencing the Negroes and Mexican workers who labored there, close quote. In a 1961 pamphlet called How Cuba Uprooted Race Discrimination, the SWP declared that, I quote, "One of the most important lessons that the Cuban Revolution has for us in the United States was in the form that the Negro people of Cuba became the first of any country in the Americas to win full economic, social, and political equality," close quote. On the year that it finally broke with the ICFI, in 1963, the SWP gave a lecture on the centenary of the Emancipation Proclamation in the United States that indicated a renewed attitude towards the long completed bourgeois revolution in the United States. The next stage in historical development was not presented by the SWP as of abolition of capitalism by the American working class in connection with the world socialist revolution. It was, and I quote, the Cubans of the 1960s that took up where the American revolutionists of the 1860s left off. After all, the Castro regime, which Kennedy is so intent on destroying, has uprooted racial discrimination in Cuba, close quote. The implication of these views were that the struggles within the United States should assume an essentially democratic, that is, bourgeois character, and to find precisely in this aspect its connections with the movements that were developing internationally with their supposed anti-colonial character. This represented a complete break with Marxism, and particularly with the theory of permanent revolution defended by Trotsky. It was a full capitulation to the false mightiness of the historically futureless Stalinist bureaucracy and bourgeois nationalism, the agencies of crisis-ridden imperialism. The ICFI has proudly refused to bow to these forces. It was not afraid to call things by their names and refused to associate the term socialist and worker state in any way to the bourgeois nationalist regime in Cuba. Despite suffering relentless attacks and slanders by the infuriated petty bourgeois Pabloites, its uncompromising defense of principles won the revolutionary elements that carried on the struggle for Trotskyism in the United States. The Workers' League developed the fight against the increasingly reactionary forms of nationalism promoted by the ruling classes to divert a renewed revolutionary wave of the international working class in the late 60s. In particular, it had to fight a trend of national separatist movements that in the United States took the form of Black nationalism. The Pabloids' unlimited prostration before Castroism and Black nationalism may have won them some easy recruitments, but it could not win Helen Halyard, much less could it allow the development of the kind of political leader that she became. Comrade David pointed in his written tribute to Helen that she was deeply rooted in the heritage and fighting traditions of the most advanced sections of the African American working class. In her 1997 lecture on Ebonics, Helen quoted passages of Trotsky's answer to the poet Claude McKay that the Workers' League had evoked in its 1969 response to the SWP support for Black nationalism, which certainly spoke deeply to her at the time. Trotsky declared in his answer the utmost importance of forming a cadre within the Black working class, quote, capable of grasping the identity of interests and destiny of the Negro masses with those of the masses of the world, and in first place, with the destiny of the European working class. Helen's life represents the fulfillment of this demand. Moreover, it testifies that the revolutionary potential of the African American working class was and is not of a national or racial character. It can only flourish and develop as part of the international struggle of the working class for socialism. Helen fought resolutely for these principles during decades which were characterized by the deep isolation of revolutionary socialists, in which the objective conditions did not allow the Trotskyist party to lead struggles for political power. She has passed away amidst a great historical shift in the very first years of what we have defined as the decade of socialist revolution. I feel honored to have been able to participate in discussions that examine those historical developments alongside Helen, in which I could witness her revolutionary character and presence. I want to conclude my remarks by trying to make comrades aware of the immense power that the figure of Helen advocates in our work to build the Trotskyist movement in Brazil. This is a country in which the working class has also been formed in large part by the descendants of African slaves. The rise of capitalism and wage labor did not end misery, brutal class violence, and race discrimination. However, by submitting those peoples to common exploitation by capital, it developed an objectively unified working class and created conditions for the abolition of every form of oppression. Massive multiracial struggles of the working class have marked the history of Brazil in the 20th century. They were managed, however, to be diverted by the betrayals of Stalinism, Pabloism, and the Workers' Party, the PT, all based on the submission of the working class to the national bourgeoisie. Today, these forces have been completely discredited. The Brazilian bourgeoisie is increasingly resorting to racialism as their preferred choice to divert the revolutionary struggles that are on the agenda. Our fight to establish the necessary leadership of this fight will bring up the name of Helen multiple times. Her name, with all the historical fighters for the Fourth International, is definitely inscribed in the flag of our party. Thank you, comrades.